back to Asia Podcast Festival Conference Day 2. We're here with a final speaker for the day and for the entire conference. We wish everyone has had a wonderful 2 days so far, and we'd like to wish all that have joined us and attended this conference a great end to 2021, and to only hear good things from all budding podcasters and even the experienced veterans who are here to pick up new tips and skills to create even better audio content for 2022. Now, to introduce our final speaker, we have TIO UTOMO from Box to Box. TIO UTOMO has 14 years of experience in the media industry in Indonesia, especially in radio and sports media, working with several well-known companies like 442, Fox Sports, 90minutes.com, and some of the best radio stations in Indonesia like Trax FM, iRadio, V Radio, and Female Radio. He is now building a sustainable podcast ecosystem with Box to Box ID. TIO will be covering the topic of building a podcast network in Indonesia. Once again, if you do have any questions for TIO, leave them in the Q&A section and we'll cover them after TIO's sharing. TIO, it's great to have you here. An honor. Please take it away.
Yeah. Hi, Harris.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, very good. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Again, anybody who have questions, please put them in. TIO, I think this is an honor to have you here.
Thank you very much.
So, all the best.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, my presentation is just as simple as the others, but my presentation is more about my story and my college and the other partners to build the Box to Box podcast networks, where we start and how we managed to reach this kind of levels like in 2021 and what is our project in the next in 2022. Let me share my screen first. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, like Harry said, my name is TIO UTOMO, but my full name is TIO Prasetyo Utomo. 14 years experience in the media, especially in radio stations. I start my career in the 101.4 Trax FM Jakarta as the creative assistant in 2007, and then I moved to the Philippines and Singapore as well, also for working with 442 and Fox Sports, and then also working with another radio station. And now since 2018 I'm building the sustainable podcast ecosystem with Box to Box ID with all of my colleagues like Pangeran Siahaan, Bonaventura Winarso, and Valentinus Premianto, Rindra Danarildo, and Rana Ditya Alif, our new CEO. Shout out to Rana. He just got these positions like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the other program team, creative team from Box to Box. And here are the story of the Box to Box media network. If you listen to Box to Box podcast channel, we know we have like 50, 57, 56 podcast channels. So if you notice, we have the opening bumper for all our podcasts. So I'm the guy who took the voiceover from the of Box to Box Media Network. So you might be familiar if you listen to Box to Box Media Network. I'm the guy who behind the opening bumper for Box to Box Media Network. But the story is like this. Box to Box start in 2018. We start with Box to Box Football Podcast. Me, Pangeran, and Justinus Laksana. We're 3 person who loves football, and we working in the same ecosystem. And that time we working in beIN Sports. We cover the English Premier League and also Serie A, and that time I still working at 442 and also Fox Sports. And then we have this discussion in early 2018 to create some sports media that time. So and then we start with World Cup 2018. We try to create the YouTube channel, but since our schedule, me, Pangeran, and Justin, is quite difficult to match the schedule between 3 of us. So we decided to Pangeran that time. He asked me to build. Why don't we create some podcasts like in UK we have the Totally Football Show, Football Rumbles, and the other Guardian Football Show, the other football podcasts. Because in that time in Indonesia, there's no football podcast in Indonesia. So yeah, we made it our first episode in the middle of 2018, the start of the season, and then in that time, many people believe me, Pangeran, and Justin. We can only, we can only have 5 until 6 episode for the podcast because our schedule is crazy. But thank God, until now, Box to Box Football Podcast, we have more than 200 episodes, and then we are the best football podcast in Southeast Asia. Number one in Indonesia and also the other country, because Indonesia is crazy about football. So Box to Box Football Podcast is the best football podcast in Southeast Asia. But maybe we can have available in another language like English or the other country. But if you want to listen, please listen. But it's in Indonesian language. But after we create the Box to Box Football Podcast, Pangeran and me have discussions about why don't we create the some of the podcast network, because that time podcast is it's start of the era of the podcast in Indonesia 2018. Well, I'm working in the radio station since 2007. When I'm back from Manila and Singapore in 2015, I'm working with V Radio, and then that time I talked with my boss that time. Why don't we create some podcasts, and all the person who in the building in the room, they are laughing because they don't know about podcasts. But now many of radio station in Indonesia, they have podcasts. So yeah, it's silly if I remember in 2016 and 17 I told them to create a podcast and they don't want to do it because they thought radio still bigger than podcast, but now they have to compete with the podcast. So that's a little bit intermezzo. But yeah, in 2018, Pangeran and me have a discussion. So why don't we create some podcast network? So yes, we have podcast network. So which one we want to have to be our first podcast network channel? So Pangeran talk with the two guys from well, if there's some audience in Indonesia now, these two guys from Bekasi, near from Indonesia, but this city, many of memes in internet. If you see, if you want to see the memes, so Bekasi is near, so it's just internal joke. But yeah, two guys who love football, they have a podcast called Retropus. If you flip the words, it called supporter. So supporter is like fans, football fans. So they have a football podcast also, like Box to Box Football Podcast, but they have the different perspective. And yeah, in 2018 and I believe in August or November, they join with us, and the other we create some podcast like Showbox is a movie podcast to Lisa, our host. She's a curator and editor in Asumsi that time, and then she also have a preview and review, and she also have working in the ecosystem of movies in Indonesia, movie industry in Indonesia. So and then after that, we have Asumsi Bersuara. We collaboration with one of the social politic for the younger person in Indonesia called asumsi.co to have a podcast. So we call it Asumsi Bersuara. Bersuara is like voice, so voice from the Asumsi. And then after that, we have Box Out, the best basketball podcast in Indonesia, with Rana Ditya Alif, Amar Gil, and also P Double. Three of them. Those three guys is the best basketball pundit right now in Indonesia. And then we have the European football cover. We cover the European football. Why don't we have the local football? So create the Umpan Tarik. So this is focused on local football, Indonesia local football. And then after that, we have Otaku Box. This is the best Japanese podcast in Indonesia. And now they are the first podcaster in Indonesia who have a Japanese bar in Indonesia. So applause for Otaku Box. They have a really big community also with Retropos. So this is our first podcast in Box to Box Net Podcast Network. And then after that, yeah, you know what happened after that. We are the first and the largest podcast network in Indonesia, with more than 50 podcasts cover from every genre, sports, comedy to audios, drama. So we have 50 plus podcasts right now. I thought we only in the beginning. I talked with Pangeran. I thought we only have 20 podcasts that time. Okay, just like 20, so we can focus. Blah blah blah. But the network is getting bigger, and everyone is eager to join with Box to Box Media Network. And why podcast is bigger in Indonesia since 2019? So in 2018 is the birth of the podcast in Indonesia. Not so many podcasters in Indonesia that time, but that time Spotify came to Indonesia, and they approached the podcaster one by one. And then 2019, it's the year that podcast is getting bigger and bigger in Indonesia. So there's a quote from Carl Zuzarte, head of studio Spotify. He said that Indonesia has the largest number of podcast listeners in Southeast Asia. 20% of Indonesian Spotify users consume podcasts, and the podcast scene in Indonesia is one of the most exciting in the world today. And the Indonesian podcast audience continues to rapidly grow, and even during a pandemic. At first, me and my colleague in Box to Box thought in pandemic, people will, like users will reduce the consume to listen to podcasts. But that thing is wrong, because we have survey in 2019 and 2020, at the first of 2020, we from the 2,874 correspondent, and 97% know about podcasts and listen 6 until 10 podcasts every week, and also have interest in making a podcast. And here are the results. So yeah, reason people listen to the podcast because it's on demand. So many people in Indonesia now, they change the habit, because they can download the audio first at their home with their Wi-Fi, and then they listen when they commute to the office or to the school or to the university and everything. And this is the habit that changed in 2019. Plus, we have the finished project from the MRT in Jakarta. So there's so many people from suburb going to Jakarta and central Jakarta using MRT, about like 30 minutes from the first station until the last station in Jakarta. And that time, many people listen to the podcast who have durations like 30 minutes. Maybe if we have 60 minutes duration, so they will stop in 30 and then they continue again at the office or when they're back home. I remember when I took the MRT, and then I sit standing behind someone, and someone is listen to the podcast, and he listened to my Box to Box Football podcast. That moment, it feels like, wow, this is the feels like when you're podcast listening by someone. And then I was thinking, like, I want to say hi to him. Hey, I'm the guy who's in the podcast. Come on, say hi to me. But yeah, he's just enjoy the conversation in podcast. And then that time, 2019 is the big year for podcasts in Indonesia. But the shocking survey result also, many people listen to podcasts at home. I'm the one who never listen podcast at home, because at home there's so many like alternative media that I can use it. But the survey said that many people listen podcasts before they go to sleep. So I have a adult podcast called Cerita Malam. So this is my personal project. But some people listen to Cerita Malam at before they go to sleep, and the other also same listen to this other podcast in Box to Box Football Box to Box Podcast Network. Same, they listen before they go to sleep. So this number is crazy because it's almost 60% people listen podcast to home. Because before this survey, we released this survey, this polling, people still thought that okay, many people will listen to podcasts when they on at the schools, at the office, or when they commute to the office. But but yeah, that's the result. And the answer of that survey is podcasts are interesting, easy, and flexible enough to consume. Because even though when you create podcasts, it's easy to create podcasts nowadays. I remember when back in 2018, I need to publish on Burberry or also in SoundCloud, and we need to pay. But now we have Anchor, who just get free. Everyone can publish their podcast. Everyone can have their own podcast. So that's why one of the reason the podcast industry in Indonesia is getting bigger and bigger. And that's the reason why, behind the reason that why we built a podcast network. Right now in Indonesia, we have several podcast network besides Box to Box. We have Podcast Mas Asia Network. We also Collab Asia. I'm not sure they are Collab Asia as well. And then we have the, I forgot the name. The other the Podcam or whatever. So there's several podcast network in Indonesia. Why they create? Because this is the main reason. Like I explained before, Indonesian podcasting audience is growing rapidly. And over 20% of Indonesian Spotify users listen podcasts every month, higher than the global average and the largest in Southeast Asia. And then this year, since the middle of last year in 2020, I working with the Ministry of Communications, and they also have collaborations with some of the company, audio company in Indonesia, who also have the podcast, horror podcast called "Do You See What I See, Mr. Popo?" and the teams called Public Suara Rakyat. They almost every week they have the training to create a podcast. So from that data, I can guarantee that every weekend in Indonesia have more than 500 new podcast channel because of that training session with the Ministry of Communication in Indonesia. So podcast is getting bigger and bigger in Indonesia. But no one else sees the potential of turning this media ecosystem into a sustainable industry. But here we are in Box to Box. We're not here just to make more podcasts. We are trying to invite you guys to our journey to enable, connect, and establish the Indonesian podcast industry. Enable anyone to create and level up their podcast, connect podcaster with the all stakeholders across the industry, establish the Indonesian podcast industry to benefit all stakeholders from podcaster to brands. And what we do to enable, connect, establish, this is what we did since 2018. Our network, like 50+% now, we have 30+ million play and 1 million listeners in Spotify, and we have 10 people, our team in 10 people who have creative in our podcast channel. And then we produce, acquire original podcasts. We also curate some of the new podcasts, and then some of the podcasts is now in the 100 top Spotify podcasts. This is our roster in Box to Box podcast network. You can see there's so many genre here. We have podcast bercanda. We have the new family talks with obrolan babi bu. We have Randi Gustika, the small talks between two best friends. And then we have the audio drama with Hello Goodbye, which now this podcast also in exclusive in Noise, the newcomer in the podcast industry. And then we have Bung to Bung, the short news, the summary of news of the week with the interesting comments. You guys, you should listen to this podcast. And also we collaboration with Netflix and at the back in 2020 when we have Ramadan session, so Ramadan Pak Budi, and then we also have the Legal 101, and then we also, it's one of my podcast Om. This is the podcast about the people who have husbands and the family things, the 30 up problems guy. And also in here we have Gamebot, is the video games with the interesting talking, and also our newest podcast who consistent in the 50 almost also 30 top 30 in Spotify self-development from Andreas Bordas. This is the podcast that to upgrade your skills and everything with his development. It's really, really good. And also we have the Dongeng, so also audio drama, many podcast channel in Box to Box Podcast Network. So also we have the exclusive platform from Spotify, podcast Box to Box Football Podcast, also Daily Quotes, and On This Day by Dita Amelia. So by joining our networks, so many podcasters join our network because they don't know how to sell their podcast. So we create them, we also grooming them to get more brands, to link with brands with our podcast channel. And then this is what what we did in Box to Box. So we just not only acquire them, but we also training them, and then we have discussion sessions and everything. We have a review once in a month with the teams, and also we promote them to the brands that we know very well. Until now we have so many so many clients that want to join, or want to place their brands on our podcast. And then also we have the studio right now, 3 places: Fatmawati, Kuningan, and Dipati Ukur is in Bandung. Fatmawati and Kuningan is in Jakarta. So from our small dreams in 2018, now Box to Box inspired the Indonesian podcast scene, and then we have 50 podcast channel plus in Box to Box Podcast Network. And also in 2019 we held the first podcast day that we gather almost the biggest podcast channel in Indonesia from 10 a.m. in the morning until 4 p.m. and the people who came is really, really enthusiastic. And then that's the first show, the first off-air event for the podcaster in Indonesia. And then we also, last year we held the first podcast pitch. We have the winners, Mencoba Minimalis, podcast Embonek, sama Goib. They are the winner of the podcast pitch. So they need to create some presentations, and then they need to create the one episode to present to the judges. And then and they won. And then we have 3 podcast channel who join our network. And also we grow podcast audience, and grow our podcast business. This is the story about Box to Box. Let's raise the volume, and then maybe after this we can have the questions and answers. I'm back to it, Haris.
Thank you, Theo. That was wonderful. I'm absolutely impressed to have like 50 plus podcasts all under your belt. That's crazy to think, even like how to manage all that. Well, we do have a few questions already in, so Theo, I'll just ask them on behalf of the audience. So the first question we have is from Wolga Setianto. So his question is: I listened to Box to Box Football Podcast from the early days, and he really enjoys it. Kudos to you and your team. However, do you think that Box to Box Podcast can be more than just entertainment? Will it also become an influencer in creating opinion and educating the public? What do you think about that?
Yes, when we first create the Box to Box Football podcast, we have coach. I mean, our one of the pandit. His name is Justinus Laksana. Coach, we call Coach Justin. At that time, he have so many haters, and then suddenly he create some YouTube channel, and he joined with the Collab Asia. I believe there's a session before yesterday. I mean, yeah, with the Collab Asia. So yeah, they joined with Collab Asia, and then Coach Justin and Pangeran Sian become the influencer in creating opinion about football in Indonesia, because that's the kind of thing that we create ambience in Box to Box Football podcast. I'm as in the middleman, Justin with with his haters and everything, Pangeran with his skills and his knows about footballs, and then we join as a team together, three of us, and then that's the thing that people maybe right now they miss us because our schedule is not met anymore. So yeah, but yeah, we can create opinion. I remember 2 years ago. I mean, like 2 years ago, we create opinion about Manchester United will be the champion of Premier League 2 years ago, and many people believe about that. But yeah, United never won the league since 2013. So yeah, that's the thing that people, and then so many people now want to be like us. Like I got a message on my Instagram yesterday, and then he said like, I listened to your podcast in 2018, and then because of your podcast, I'm trying to create my own football channel, football show, and then I also trying to create some media in Instagram, blah blah blah. So it's like that kind of message for me is like, wow, our impact to the people in Indonesia, because we always say that even you're not someone, you just like regular guy, going to the office, going to the school, but you have the strong opinion about football. You can create your own content. No, because we have podcasts, because you have YouTube, we have everything. We have TikTok now, we have Instagram Reels, so many platform they can use it, and then they just don't know how to start it, and they just don't know where they can connect with the right people in the football industry in Indonesia.
Right, so that's where you guys come in. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think when it comes to like football content specifically, I think it's all about the fans. We've seen, especially in the UK, we have like AFTV, Arsenal Fan TV.
Yeah.
True Geordie right now. It's crazy. It's huge. And I didn't know how big it was in Indonesia. I'm actually very, very surprised to see that you guys have your own, whole ecosystem when it comes to football. I don't really understand Bahasa too much, but I'll try and subscribe and listen. I just saw that you guys had an episode on Ragnick, the new United coach.
Yeah, the new one.
I'll check that out a little bit later. Okay, on to the next question. A question from Bobby Mandela.
It's my friend. He also have a podcast as well. The podcast called BKR Brothers. The BKR Brothers is huge in Indonesia. His podcast have a big community in Indonesia, and he also have a lot of merchandise. So Bobby, he's good, a friend of mine.
That's good. He's supporting you with this question then. So he asks, hi Mastio, do you think podcast will still be sexy from 3 years from now?
Yes, still sexy from 2 years from now, and then there's so many brands still trying to look up with podcasts. I mean, they're trying to explore what they can do with podcasts in Indonesia. What can they brought things to a podcast, blah blah blah. But the things is maybe starting from now and the next 2 years, we will know which the main player in podcast in Indonesia, especially because like when people trying to create podcasts, if they the ambition is try to get more money, like the commercial thing, and then the result is not like they expect that. I mean, they expect that they get money, endorsement, and everything. But yeah, that kind of people who in podcast industry, they will like disappear one by one. But in another 3 years, it's a plus and minus things. But the plus is like our contender is left by one, but the minus is like people will know which is the main player in podcast industry in Indonesia especially.
So I think basically you're trying to say that I think you mentioned just now that every weekend you have 500 new podcasts coming in.
Yes,
right?
because the podcast training that created by Ministry of Communication Indonesia in collaboration with the All Podcaster in Indonesia and also with the Public Suara Rakyat, my friend's company, and then he create almost every week they have the classes about podcast, like basic podcast skill, editing podcast skill, and then in that class you need to create one new channel of podcast. So every attendees need to create podcast channel. So that's why we have like 500 new podcast channel every weekend. So that's and I talked with the Spotify representative in Indonesia, Emil. He said like this number is really huge because of this kind of training and this kind of promotions that people trying to know about want to know about a podcast. And the interesting thing another interesting is in Indonesia, not so many people in Indonesia knows podcast is audio only. So because there's so many YouTubers have their own podcast, but with a video. So every time I have a chance to have a training with the peoples about podcasts, I will give them explanation about. So the podcast originally is from iPod broadcasting, so it's audio, and there's if they have a visual, yes, it's just more they upgrade their podcast to have audio, because in Indonesia, you can compare audio with the video in Indonesia, like podcast and YouTube in Indonesia. YouTube is big in Indonesia, but the podcast now, because of the celebrity who have podcasts on YouTube, the podcast industry, people getting know about, oh, this podcast, and trying to know how can we create a podcast, a simple podcast in Indonesia. So yeah, like I told you in my presentation, because of Anchor, it's free right now. People trying to create a podcast. Back in 2018, we need to pay, I remember, almost like 1.8 million rupiah per month to have to have a quota with SoundCloud to upload our podcast that time. But now you don't need to pay anything. It's free. Everyone can create podcasts. Just create your podcast, and yes, it's still sexy for 3 years from now.
Okay, wonderful. I have a question about that 500 every weekend. How many of them actually do continue to make, a second episode, or even still are around after maybe 2-3 months?
Yes. In Indonesia, we have the Indonesia podcast community. I mean, Indonesia podcaster, they call Indonesia podcaster. So if there's new podcaster join in Indonesia, we have the conversation almost twice a week on our Discord channel, and then there's so many moderator. There's tips and tricks. So yeah, mostly of them they finish their first seasons. Basically, their first season like 12 or 10 episodes, and after that maybe they will take a break. I'm not sure taking break how long, but maybe 6 months or a year, or maybe only like 1-2 months. But yeah, they will finish the first season. 10 or 12 episodes, depends on what kind of season they want to do. But yeah, they will finish about like 8 and 10 episodes. So not like 1-2 and then they just gone.
Right.
Yeah, there's someone who have that 1-2 episode and they just finish their podcast because it just get boring. Or maybe he or she is getting busy at that time. So yeah, but mostly on podcaster in Indonesia, they finish their first season and they will start another season. But that how long they got the break, it's the questionable. So I mean, like, it's the mystery for us.
Okay, that's good. Okay, there's another question from an anonymous attendee. They ask, when and how do you propose our podcast to join on the B2B media network?
So yeah, right now, basically we open for everyone to, send the podcast profile to us, but not all. I mean, because we already have like 50 plus podcast channel, we need to focus on them first. But if your podcast is really, really good and different from the other podcast channel and podcast profile that we have, maybe you can join with us, or maybe you need to wait until our Box to Box podcast page next season.
Okay, so there's no like ongoing opening, so you have
Now
to wait. Okay.
ongoing, but if you want to send your podcast to our email, it's fine. You can send to, wait, I forgot because the email, they have two emails about this. Wait, you can send the podcast to box ID. So it's boxtoboxid@gmail.com. So
Okay.
send your podcast to that email, and then there's someone will answer your email.
All right, wonderful. We have a question on the chat. The question is from W. In the new wave of audio content, it seems everyone started their own podcast network. What does Box to Box offer compared to other networks?
Well, this is the interesting, the made box to box different with the other podcast network. So in Indonesia we have a podcast Mas Asia network. We have also the other podcast network, but in box to box we didn't aim the like the biggest the biggest number in podcast, the highest profile. We prefer to curate the if the podcast is really good but there's no one listen at that time, we can curate that podcast, grooming that podcast, and then we can grow together like our vision that I explained before. So that's the things that we make us different with the other. And then we have the biggest channel, I mean the biggest podcast channel in Indonesia. So if you have a brand coming, they want to placement on one podcast, we can spread to the other podcast. So every other podcast can get the the taste of the being a network. And also they can use the studio, because we have three different studios in Jakarta and Bandung. We also want to open another studio in other cities. So this is gonna be big. And then our podcaster got some, it feels like they our partner, like we have a review together, and if there's and then we can create some content together, so you can cross promo with the other podcasts, you can collaborate with the other podcasts. That's the things that many our podcasters did in our network.
Okay, wonderful. That's a great answer. Bobby came back and actually big yourself up, and I think he plugged in his own podcast. So he says that you were the one that made his podcast for the very first time at Box to Box. BKR Brothers podcast is basically from Theo's idea. Respect.
I talked with one of the member of BKR Brothers, Rio, because I know Bobby, Rio, and Molan since I'm working in radio station since 2007, and we know each other. And then that time I have I went out with Rio and talked like, hey, do you want to have a podcast? Yeah, I want to have a podcast, but with who? Yeah, Bobby and Molan. So and now they have the biggest community in Indonesia. If you go to Jakarta right now, and then you ask some younger people in Indonesia who listen to podcast, mostly they will say, well, I listen to BKR Brothers every Tuesday morning, because the conversation is really nice. The conversation is really good.
Okay, that's good. All right. A question from an anonymous person. They asked, what is the main revenue stream for Box to Box?
Well, mostly, yes, we from the brands. Yeah, we have the brand that's sustainable, like contract us like 1 year, 2 years, and then a short contract. But yeah, mostly the main revenue is from the same like the radio, same like the other media, from the advertisings.
All right, perfect. Okay, there's a question in chat. On a scale of 1 to 10, how interested are brands in buying ads or sponsored, sections in podcasts?
Well, this is interesting. So, well, when I start the Box to Box podcast channel, I try to sell my podcast channel to the brands, and then many brands didn't know about podcast. What podcast? And then because I'm working in radio station since 2007, so this is gonna be it's quite rude my strategy. I said like, well, yeah, this is the same like radio station but without music, but you can get your numbers right on next 2 weeks. You can get exact data that you cannot have on the radio. So when you put when you pay us, when you place your brand on our podcast, you can give us the KPI, your target and everything, and then we will try to meet your target. If this is what I told them to the agency and to the brands. If you place your brands in your radio stations, okay, in your radio stations, you cannot get your exact number right away. You will get your like a broad, like the abroad data that it's not focused on the one show, but it's a whole radio. So that's
Right.
made the podcast is different from the other. Like from the radio, because the head to head is the radio in that time. So that's why and then you can create more content, like we don't have any minutes to, like minimum minutes when you trying to say the ad-libs and everything, and then you can explore which kind of ad-libs you want to, you want the host to read it. You can make it like audio drama, you can create some effect with effect or some things. So the podcast is more creative than a radio. That time I told to the brand and agency like that. It's kind of rude, but it works.
That's good. No, I think it's really interesting because radio, I mean, firstly, people listen to radio and not everybody's paying attention. Everybody's listening to radio usually for music, right? The thing about podcasts is that it's very, very niche. If, let's say, for example, I'm talking about football one day, and if my brand is specifically about football or maybe something along that line, it's very, very niche. I know that the listeners are going to be interested in my brand. If a different podcast talks about, let's say, self-development, and I'm a brand that does, maybe like courses and stuff like that, or training, then it's a lot more, niche. So I think that for sponsors or for brands, I think podcasts right now sounds like a better option than radio.
Yes, a better option. And then I remember this year, this is interesting. The Boxable Football podcast got sponsored by Durex, a condom. And then our creative team, they try to brainstorm with us and everything. Oh, what should we do? What should we create? Blah blah blah. And then yes, we create some content about I forgot which episode, but the content about the goalkeeper. So you need to save with your partner, but your club is safe with the goalkeeper and the best defender in the world. So
goalkeepers wear a glove.
That kind of content. So you can create many contents. Like there's no relation between football and condom, right?
Yeah.
But the brand we want to put on the Boxable Football podcast. Okay, let's do it. And then this is the art of podcast in podcast industry. I mean, so you can put your brand, and then the creative team will brainstorm and everything, and come to the brand with the good creative, like we did it with Durex, and we also did it with we have a wine company in Indonesia called Orang Tua. So there's a collaboration with Orang Tua. Orang Tua means your parents. So in Box to Box podcast, because the Orang Tua, so we create content about a story about a player who have parents and a father and son at the same who play in the same team. Right. It's simple like that. So yeah, and then the clients really like it about that, because it's not hard selling, it's a soft selling. And then there's one brand they place on our podcast, and they don't want to us to as explicit to say like, oh, this is the brand, blah blah blah. No, they really want to us to try to soft selling, just one words about that brand, that's it. So it's good for us, because okay, you didn't the brand didn't disturb the content, but we just like make it feels like it's real, it's soft, and people even didn't realize about the advertising. Same like when BKR Brothers did with some of the milk company in Indonesia. Until the podcast is finished, there's no many people realize that's the placement episode at that time. Right. Because the podcasters is really good, the conversation is really good, the guest stars is also really good, the creative is really good, so it's really soft, and then people didn't know that's about osteoporosis, about the bone problems and everything.
Yeah. Wonderful. I think with podcasts, and ads, it doesn't have to be an ad. It can be a story.
Yep.
And people love that. I think people are getting a bit too sick and tired
Yeah.
of, you know, standard ads.
Yeah, our one of our podcast channel, Retropus, two guys from Bekasi, those guys really creative. If there's some brand placement place in their podcast, they can create creative more than 5 minutes to just explain that brand. And then at the beginning, same time like Bekar Badas, which with the milk company, at the beginning, you didn't know they will talk about that brand. They will talk about footballs, about lifestyle, and suddenly they just switch to the brand, and everyone's like, oh, okay, this is the placement. And it depends on the creative team and the podcaster, you know.
Okay, good. All right. So on to there's actually a lot more questions. All right. So somebody asked, there are many podcasts in Indonesia, especially on the topic of football. How do you stay distinct and stay niche?
Okay. Most of all, this is the kind of questions that many people ask to me and my colleagues Pangeran and Justin. So yeah, if you want to create a podcast channel, just try don't to copycat the box to box podcast, because you cannot beat us. I mean, like I'm sorry, because this is the real situation. Because like well people, if you want to talk about people in Indonesia, if they talk about football podcast, they will listen to box to box podcast. But you can still have the audience if you have different genre. I mean, still in podcast but different, still in football but different genre. Like we have the Fantasy Premier League podcast. Also, we have special podcast talking about Serie A Italia. Also talking about Germany League, or maybe Asian League, J League, or maybe Southeast Asia League. That's kind of podcast. I mean, that kind of topic that Box to Box Football podcast will not cover every day. It's just like, you know, every week. I mean, that's it. So yeah, if you want to have a football podcast, try to check which kind of podcast, a football podcast, the topics that there's no there's no podcast football podcast about like Serie A. I mean La Liga. I believe we don't have any La Liga podcast in Indonesia. So, or this is I always thought this to my audience, like you can create some motorsports podcast like MotoGP or F1. So because MotoGP is very big in Indonesia, so. Yeah.
Okay.
Like that.
I think there's a lot of things in football, especially. I mean, we have Fabrizio Romano, who only talks about transfers.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. It's huge, and then he's very big. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of space in football as well.
Yep. Yep.
Moving on to another question. In your personal opinion, talking about the type of content for each country, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when people mention Singapore?
Oh, this is not the word. Oh, the content.
Is it content in the chat? Yeah.
Yeah, no. In your personal opinion, talking about the type of content of each country. Okay, the content in Singapore. Well, actually, I haven't heard any podcast from Singapore. I'm sorry. Well, but if I in the Singapore, I will interest when there is a podcast talking about in Singapore culture. Well, you remember they have a Netflix, I mean a Netflix episode about the Singapore culture of, I forgot the series
Singapore
name.
Social?
Not Singapore Social. There's a apa namanya? Sorry. The show is about the Singaporean back in 60s before Singapore bigger like in like now.
Well, I don't even know.
So they explain the story when Singapore still there's so many, you know, like the Singaporean trying to learn Malayu language, and then they try they're docking the schools, and yeah, there's a good kind of history, because not so many people knows about Singaporean culture, especially from Indonesia, because when you come to Singapore, just like, okay, this is the modern, more a really good city, really good country, very clean and everything, but not so many people outside Singapore knows about, especially me, I knows about the culture of the Singapore.
That's very true.
For me, maybe yeah, I will interesting to listen to that kind of podcast.
Okay, wonderful. All right, W asks, could you tell us more about the Netflix and Box to Box collaboration, and how do you make money out of it?
Okay. Well, we have the collaboration with Netflix in Ramadan. I mean, like before Hari Raya in 2020, the collaborations, and there's you know, Netflix. We are producing the everything with the audio drama. The concept is from Netflix and everything. We publish and everything. For make it money, well, it's kind of like I cannot say in here. I'm sorry, man. I cannot say money in the I mean, like in this kind of conference. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. Okay, I think W also asks, podcast listeners in the US love audio drama and audio documentary. They say that the trend did not catch on in Indonesia. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, no. Until now, no, not like that, because we just start podcast. People still enjoy the talking with conversation podcast and everything, but well, actually I have audio drama podcast. So this is an adult podcast called Cerita Malam, night story in English. Starting well, my last episode is in March 2020, but now my podcast in 23, I mean in the 23 top podcast in Spotify. I never promote any again, but that's I realized that, well, people start to listen to the audio drama because as for information, in Indonesia, every time we have Ramadan in here, we have in radio station they have audio drama to accompany us to breakfasting. So yeah, that's the habit in Indonesia. So that habits maybe we want to break in podcast, because they still like there's some perspective in Indonesian people, like, so you listen to audio drama when you in Ramadan. I mean in Ramadan you listen audio drama and before you breakfasting. That's the type of stereotype, the kind of stereotype that have in Indonesia. Many people in Indonesia like that. But yes, audio drama maybe in next year will be big in Indonesia. Also the documentary, because I remember I create one of documentary in radio station when I was in Trax FM called Jakarta Sinking 2012, and then the ambience and the reception from the people is really, really good. That time many people, like, that time there's not only Twitter and short message service, SMS, but there's so many message coming and then Twitter coming. But yeah, documentary and audio drama, I believe next year will be big in Indonesia. Well, there's some podcast channel who have audio drama, like Rapot, Magnatos also have, and then Hello Dita also. But next year this kind of podcast will be getting big and bigger.
Right. I mean, one thing that I think about when it comes to like Indonesian TV, you have your drama sinetron. Right? Do you think that will be something that audio podcast can take over?
Yeah, maybe, but if you watch the sinetron, the interesting part is when you zoom in, zoom out. There's so many like YouTuber in Singapore and also in Malaysia. They try to recreate that kind of scene, like zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. But that's the kind of like sinetron in Indonesia. They're so big in Indonesia. I remember when I was in Singapore. I live in Katong in that time with
that's where I am right now.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. It's a nice neighbor. It's a nice neighbor. I live in Katong, and then I crossed some of I forget the area. So there's so many. There's a hawker. The market near Katong. So I forgot the market, the name, but there's so people using their phone. They see watching sinetron, like, wow. Watching Indonesian sinetron while she waiting the bus. So that kind of things that you need to big effort to recreate in podcast, because sinetron, like the zoom in, zoom out effect and the mimic from the actor and actress, you cannot replace them with the voice. I mean, with the audio.
That's true. It's very true. Okay. Well, I think there's no more questions. I do have one question though.
Yeah.
Right, Theo. For football, who do you support?
Man United.
Did you watch the game yesterday?
Yep, last night. It's really good game. It's really good game. It's really good game. Thank God. Thank God the Ronaldo scored the penalty.
Yes, that's good. All right. I think any last questions for Theo?
No. So which club do you support, Haris?
I support Liverpool.
Okay, so
Yeah.
fine.
So,
Yeah, we lost 4-0, so it's fine. No problem, no problem.
it's a good game. I mean, I think hopefully with Ragnick, he'll introduce some kind of Klopp gegenpressing.
Yeah, hopefully
Hopefully.
everything getting better. It's almost every new manager we say, hopefully we can get getting better, but still
Yeah.
the problem's
We'll see,
still the
we'll
same.
see. All the best, all the best. Well, thank you, Theo. Thank you for your time. I think you have been wonderful. I think what you do is great. I think you answering the questions, especially, have been great. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think for your time.
Thank you.
It's an honor. All the best. Hope you end 2021 great and have a wonderful 2022 to come
Thank
as
you
well.
very much, Haris. Stay safe,
Thank you, Theo.
everyone. And then shout out to Box creative team. Thank you very much for the support.
All right. Thank you, Theo. All right. Now, time to wrap up. Okay. So, thank you, Theo, for gracing this event. And again, we wish you all the best in the coming year and hopefully to see you again for future Asia podcast festivals. All right. So this wraps up APF 2021. Again, we wish to thank all our sponsors and partners for making this a reality. Thank you to all our speakers and trainers over the last month during PodLab and also for the APF conference. Congratulations again to the finalists and winners of APF Awards Night last night. And thank you to all of you who have taken the time out during this weekdays to tune in to our conference. Asia Podcast Festival is again organized by Creatives at Work and MiaVox Live. And I'm sure everyone can agree that they put up a great show filled with awesome, useful content that highlights just how vast and professional the Asia podcasting scene is. We would also like to remind all ticket holders that video on demand will be available after today with access codes being sent to everybody's email. Lastly, to remind everyone that all ticket holders will also have access to the marketplace, a community where we can help to do one-on-one matching, create opportunities to help create genuine and fruitful connections with podcasters, with other podcasters from a different part of Asia, or with potential sponsors looking to help create the next hit audio show. To join Marketplace, head over to asiapodcastfestival.com/marketplace-registration. Again, that is asiapodcastfestival.com/marketplace-registration to fill out a simple form to get started. Marketplace will be going on well after APF ends. So it will allow you to go to a network with like-minded folks. All right, so you can get on it right now. You can get on it even after APF ends. Lastly, we will also be choosing the winners of the social media contest right after this. Our team will be reaching out to you on how you can collect your prize of 50 Singapore dollars worth of Amazon vouchers. Thank you everybody for participating as well. All right, thank you once again, and we hope to see all of you again for future Asia Podcast Festivals and other events hosted by Creatives at Work or MiaVox Live. All the best and good luck. I'm Haris Malloy for Asia Podcast Festival 2021, signing out. Thank you, everybody.